Okay, Penn State football fans, you know what day it is. It's Penn State Signing Day, December, Wednesday. Johnny McGonigal, Bob Flounders. Johnny, it's been a very, very busy past couple of weeks, months for you actually, but especially with recruiting lately. Penn State signed a great class, it looks like by all accounts. We're going to hear from James Franklin and his assistants a little bit later in the day up in State College, but let's go to you first. What's your biggest maybe takeaway, for this class? What stood out to you?
Yeah, Bob, look, a lot stood out, and we're recording this here just before noon on Wednesday, before you head up to State College and, talk to Franklin and those, coaches about this class that they've worked months, even up to a year and more to put this whole thing together. And it has relatively gone pretty smoothly. Which is what James Franklin wants to see. It's what his staff wants to see. And they were able to pull in a lot of really good talent, not only just in Pennsylvania, but across the country, in the South. But the top two guys that I look at, and the top two guys ranked in this class, and something that we're not necessarily used to seeing, is the offensive line, and Javen Williams and Alex Birchmeyer. 5-star for Williams, who's James Franklin's first 5-star offensive lineman, and only the 7th 5-star from Pennsylvania that Penn State has gotten since 24/7 started keeping track of those numbers. I think in the early 2000s. So he's a key signing for this Penn State program. He didn't go elsewhere. He's staying in state. The Wyomissing star is not going anywhere. And then Birchmeyer as well is a big ad. From Virginia. And so that's where you kind of have to start. Everything starts up front. James Franklin says that all the time. And this is a unit that under Phil Troutwine is starting to round into form. We see Olu Fashanu coming back next season. You see Landon Tengwall playing out from the 2021 class, and Drew Shelton getting playing time from 2022. So things are looking up for Penn State's offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot to get to, but I just can't. Just looking at the class, Penn State continues, much to Brent Pry's dismay, to do some great things in the state of Virginia. The offensive lineman you referenced, Alex Birchmeyer. I mean, a top 50 kid nationally. A lot of people think he was the best player in the state of Virginia. It's not like the Cavaliers and the Hokies have had like a lot of success in recent years, but it just seems like more, the last few years, they've kind of dominated that state. And that's a really fertile recruiting ground, and they've been able to do it again.
Yeah, that's huge for Penn State to not only get into Virginia, but to have a lot of success there, because Brent Pry is a really good recruiter. Virginia Tech hasn't had that kind of success, first year under Brent Pry and then prior with Justin Fuente. But even you look across at Virginia and the Cavaliers, and Tony Elliott, former Clemson offensive coordinator, is also a good recruiter. And the fact that Penn State went into Virginia and got 6 of their top 10 prospects, that's huge. It's not just Birchmeyer either. Tony Rojas, who was named the All Met Player of the Year by the Washington Post, was a tremendous running back in high school, but he's coming to play linebacker. And he's the kind of guy who, like Abdul Carter, could play right away and get snaps on this Manny Diaz defense. And so you look at him, Matthias Barnwell, Mega Barnwell. He was announced as a tight end by Penn State, but he's got the size and frame to put on some more weight and potentially get on the offensive line. Kavion Keys was a huge add to this class recently. There were 4 guys who committed and ultimately signed with this Penn State class in the last week. Kavion Keys being the biggest of the 4, in my opinion. He was previously committed to North Carolina, another 4-star linebacker. And so with Keys, Rojas, and then Tamir Robinson from the Pittsburgh area, you've got 3 4-star linebackers joining this class. I already mentioned Abdul Carter in the fold. That linebacker you position, it's looking really good for this Penn State program. Not just in 2023, but down the line in 24 and 25.
I did a little math. I was pretty good at it when I was in elementary school. By my count, Johnny, depending on which service you follow, I think Penn State in its class signed 15 4-stars and 1 5-star at the offensive lineman at the top of the class. That's a lot of impressive talent. I think even for a Penn State class, they've recruited very well. But I mean, a lot of these kids were coveted kids, and I often think it speaks to the tenacious job that James Franklin and his staff have done. In when they first got here, it was, hey, some 4-stars sprinkled in with some 3-stars. Every once in a while they'd land a high 4-star, but now this is kind of the norm, and it seems to me that's a really nice number of 4-stars to go with a 5-star.
Yeah, and you mentioned that tenacity that this Penn State staff has had. It's been both ends. It's been keeping guys committed to this 2023 class, and it's been getting those late adds. I mentioned Kavion Keys, Cameron Wallace, a 3-star running back from Georgia, committing only a couple days ago. Even last week, you have Joseph Mapoye and Mason Robinson, the defensive linemen who were added to this class as well. I know we talked about them briefly last week, but to be able to get all across the country and really from West Coast, East Coast, North, South, and to be able to get these kids signed and delivered, from a week ago, and then also hold on to really most of the guys. And I say most of the guys because we're still waiting on a few players who are verbally committed to Penn State to make it official. The one to keep an eye on, and again, this might be outdated by the time someone listens to this, so apologies if that's the case, but Conrad Hussey, who's a safety from Florida, he's verbally committed to Penn State, 4-star, but he apparently is making his decision later tonight between Penn State and Miami. And Florida State, and he visited Florida State, Miami the last 2 weekends, so we'll see on that. But that's really the only concern for Penn State in this class. Everything else went pretty smoothly.
There was a little intrigue early Wednesday morning. There was a possibility. I think Penn State could add a really quality player from the state of Georgia. Didn't work out. Were you surprised that the kid stayed at home?
Not necessarily. Daniel Harris, 4-star corner. From Miami, he was hounded by SEC schools throughout his process. He was previously committed to Georgia, committed there back in July, decommitted in early November, and at that point he became a top priority for Penn State and James Franklin, and to add him to that secondary, to that corner room, would have been a really nice add. But he ultimately decided to go back to Georgia, sign with Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs, and you can't really blame a kid for going with staying in the South, staying in his region, but also going with the defending national title winners. And so, Daniel Harris not coming to Penn State, but this is still a good group for the Nittany Lions. And mentioned Conrad Hussey, at safety, he's one that's still kind of outstanding at this point. But Elliott Washington is a name that former Alabama commit. His dad played basketball at Alabama, and for Penn State to get him over the line and not have any seeds of doubt, drip in there. And so he signed, sealed, delivered. King Mack as well, which is just a phenomenal name. We're just going off names here. King, I think you want King Mack in your secondary, from St. Thomas Aquinas, teammates with Conrad Hussey. So we'll see if that relationship pays dividends in the end. But this is just a really good class. Lamont Payne as well from the Pittsburgh area, Chartiers Valley. Marcus Allen was the one that announced his signing. They did the whole signing NFL draft kind of scenario thing at the Penn State at the Lash building. So it was interesting to see who was announcing who and all that kind of stuff. So, but really, I think really strong defensive class. I mean, the vast majority of these 4-star guys are on the defensive side of the ball. And when you have Manny Diaz, assuming he's back as defensive coordinator for next year, and the culture that they're developing and have continued to develop on that side of the ball, you really like where Penn State's defense is. A lot of talk about the 2023 offense with Aller and Singleton and Catron. A lot to like with this defense moving forward.
Yeah, and obviously they're definitely going to add some talent in the transfer portal, and you kind of have to factor that in, I think, a little bit when you look at this signing day, because I know they're going to be more experienced players that are probably going to be more ready for action. But as we saw last year, there were a lot of first-year players that made significant impacts for Penn State, and there's no reason to believe it can't happen again. When you look at Penn State's needs going into maybe signing day, and you said there really weren't any surprises. Um, do you think they accomplished everything they needed to? Is there any position? I can guess a couple of them. I'm sure the fan base can too. Is there any position where you feel like they could be just a little bit short, or do you think they covered all their bases?
I think two positions. The one big one we've talked about before is wide receiver.
Yeah.
And they only have one wide receiver in this 2023 recruiting class, Carmelo Taylor, who is a super talented guy. And we talk about who was announcing who. You know, they always bring back former players to announce these signings. And it was KJ Hamler who announced Carmelo Taylor. And they're kind of the same build. Taylor is, I think around 160, 165 pounds, and he's a speedy guy. Tests defenses deep. And so he's a nice add. Penn State, though, I think they feel pretty good with where they're at from a young wide receiver standpoint. They brought in 5 wideouts in the 2022 class. They are hitting the portal hard. They are going after a lot of guys, extending a lot of offers, more than you might expect for the program of Penn State standing. But it's necessary, they feel, to get a lot, get some experience in there and hopefully sign maybe more than one, experienced wide receiver from the transfer portal. The other position would be tackle. And I say that because Williams, I think he's more of a guard. I think, he can play tackle. Birchmeyer is an interior guy. Anthony Donka as well, 3-star lineman is interior. So I think, from the portal, I think, tackle might be another spot that they go after. But again, Fashanu back, Drew Shelton getting a lot of experience. Landon Tengwall, if you really needed him to, could probably bounce out to tackle. So I think they're at an okay spot there. With top end talent, very good spot, in 2023, but looking down the line, perhaps they'll go into the portal and try and find a younger tackle who has some experience already at the Power 5 level, but has more than just 1 year of experience or 1 year of eligibility remaining.
Johnny, let me ask you about the position all the Penn State fans always want to know about no matter what, and it's never going to change. It's quarterback. Penn State's got, obviously, Drew Aller, a healthy Drew Aller ready to go in 2023. Bo Prabula behind him. Christian Veilleux has found a new home, and it is a program you know well. Pat Narduzzi's Pittsburgh Panthers. I believe he is now a Panther. But if you look at that roster, with Sean Clifford kind of moving on, they added a kid, Jackson Smolik from Iowa. What can you tell the fans about this recruitment? How did it come together? It's rare to see Penn State go into the state of Iowa for any player, much less a quarterback. But is there anything you can share about him, and how do you feel about that depth chart just kind of moving forward in 2023?
Yeah, quarterback's an interesting spot right now for Penn State. And you mentioned Christian Veilleux transferring. We kind of figured that he would transfer out. Just given the writing on the wall. He entered the 2022 offseason as the presumed backup behind Sean Clifford, and then 5-star Drew Aller comes in and he looks the part, and he takes that backup job, relegating to Veilleux to more of a third string role. And I actually like the move for him to go to Pitt. You don't see the Penn State to Pitt often. John Patrician did it a few years back, but he was a Pittsburgh native. So Veilleux from Canada doesn't necessarily have that Steel City tie or anything, but I think he'll have a better chance of getting on the field there. Phil Dracovic, Boston College transfer, coming in for Pitt this year with 1 year of eligibility left. And then after that, it should be open for Veilleux to go ahead and try and snatch that starting job. And, Dracovic even has injury history. So I like the move for Veilleux, totally understand it, get it. And, I think a lot of his teammates have his back as well. But, without him in the picture, without Sean Clifford in the picture, Aller, the presumed starter, you've got Bo Prabula, who has drawn a lot of praise, for how he's handled himself and how he's developed throughout his first year in the program. And then Jackson Smolik from Iowa, like you mentioned, totally not normal for Penn State to go into Iowa to get a 3-star quarterback. But this is a kid who was committed to Tulane. I almost said Tulsa, all the TULs in the group.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Many. He was previously committed to Tulane. Then, was a late add to the Elite 11 competition and really performed well there. And at that point, drew offers from Penn State and Cal and went with Penn State. And, he was on campus for the first time for the whiteout. He committed before even visiting Penn State for a game, and he was able to meet Trace McSorley there and was talking about how that was such a cool experience for him. And look, he's not a guy that's going to come in and could push Drew Aller for the starting job in 2023. Expect him to redshirt, but he is someone who will be competing with Bo Perbula for the job in, say, 2025 or 2026. We're looking way down the line at this point, but you also just need scholarship quarterbacks on your roster. And when Veilleur left and Clifford's out of eligibility, you have to have a third guy, if not a fourth guy. We'll see if they go to the portal and add someone, but it doesn't seem likely because it's kind of a tough sell for Penn State to go to a kid in the portal and say, hey, come here, when they seem pretty set for now and in the future at the quarterback position.
Brian, let's look at running back. James Franklin seems it sure sounds to me like James Franklin is confident that Kevon Lee not only has a chance to play in the Rose Bowl, he has not really played since the first half of the season with an undisclosed injury. But just trying to read James's comments, it almost sounds like he feels pretty good about Kevon Lee coming back in 2023. I don't want to put words in James's mouth, but if in the event that wouldn't happen, Penn State's running back room is not only young, it's talented, but it's not that deep without Kevon. London Montgomery is an in-state kid that I think is coming off a pretty significant injury. And listening to some of your comments at the start of this podcast, you think that there is another running back in this class that maybe doesn't have the running back designation. He might be an athlete, but what do you make of the running back room and how maybe this class can impact it?
Yeah, Penn State's running back room was put in kind of a tough spot, earlier in the season. We saw Keziah Holmes, former four-star. He ended up leaving right before the season during training camp, and he left the team, entered the portal.
Yep.
And then in, I believe it was October, you saw Devin Ford as well left the program. And so at that point, Penn State was left with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen as the only scholarship running backs that were healthy because Kevon Lee had been dealing with injury really throughout the entire season. I mean, he was available for the first few weeks of the year, but I think at this point he's only had 25 carries for 90 or 100 yards or so, which, I guess that was to be expected when on the surface level, when you look at it and see guys as talented as Singleton and Allen. But if Kevon is back next year, that would be great. Penn State would love to have an experienced guy like that to turn to whenever they need to. If he enters the portal, I think this was kind of the thinking behind getting a second running back in this class. Cameron Wallace, he was announced as a running back, today, and that's expected. That's where he's expected to play. A necessary pickup for Penn State, and a guy that I think was a little under the radar, overlooked coming out of the state of Georgia. But we see players come out of the South who were overlooked. There's just so many players sometimes down in those states that they really get overlooked, and I think he's one that could be special and has the speed and athleticism and everything you kind of want in a freshman that even he could contribute as a return man early on in his Penn State career.
Yeah, and is London Montgomery the kid from the Scranton area? How far along is he with regard to? I know that he had, I think, a pretty significant injury. Have you heard any updates on him?
Well, so I talked to London. This was back in early September. He suffered a torn ACL before his senior season started. Was deemed out for the year, but he had surgery pretty quickly after the injury and started rehabbing. And he has the right mindset. I remember that conversation from back in September. I was really impressed with just his mentality and the way that he's attacking this rehab. And so you see, ACLs are different with everyone. I feel like in especially different positions and different players, it's kind of, sometimes it can be finicky, but at the same time, some guys come back from ACLs better than ever. And this is a situation where we'll just have to kind of wait and see on what London Montgomery will bring to this Penn State program from an immediate standpoint, but from at the very least, a long-term standpoint. He is a talented guy. And he also watches and has watched, Pennsylvania running backs go on and have success at Penn State. It's not just Nick Singleton. Journey Brown was someone he looked up to a lot. Miles Sanders, obviously Saquon Barkley. So London Montgomery's trying to become the next in line, following their footsteps. And he's the talent to do so. He's the pedigree to do so. But, with that injury, if you're Penn State staff, you probably would feel more comfortable bringing in another running back with, Kevon Lee's future seemingly unclear.
Yeah. You mentioned Manny Diaz and kind of all the things he did and all the interesting schemes that he used this year. The 7 DB scheme that really kind of confounded some teams early in the season. I bring it up because there's a lot of players that are listed as safeties in this recruiting class, but they're different kind of body types. And with the way the game is trending now, most games, you see Penn State probably in not a lot of 3 linebacker sets. It's more like, either 3 or 4 down linemen, 2 pure linebackers. Jonathan Sutherland was kind of a tweener, or you have Daquan Hardy in the game, some 4-2-5 looks with the star position. Is that reflected maybe in the pursuit of all these safeties in this class, or is this just a nod to, hey, we really like Signee Wheatley and we really like Jalen Reed, but Keaton Ellis isn't getting any younger. Jair Brown is obviously out the door after a memorable career at Penn State, and we just need to stockpile that position.
I think it's a combination of both of those things. Definitely the latter, when you talk about Jair Brown moving on, and soon enough Keaton Ellis will be following him too. And so you like what you've seen in Jalen Reed and Signee Wheatley, but you'd like to reload that position. And it's a good year for that spot too. There's a lot of talented safety types out there. And I say safety types because a guy like Elliott Washington, for example, played corner at least most of his high school career, and he's listed as a DB coming in to this class, so he could play probably both positions. Dakari Nelson is another really talented safety, and a guy that Penn State is happy to get signed, sealed, and delivered today because again another player from the South. He's from Alabama. He was the one who was at the Auburn game when they played Penn State. He was there as an Auburn recruit, but didn't wear gear for either team, and was committed to Penn State at the time, which raised eyebrows. And then, last month he visited Ole Miss. Anthony Poindexter and the defensive staff, they're happy and relieved to get him officially signed on for this class. He's another good one. But yeah, I think there's possibility, really always with these safeties to move them to different positions, move them around the defense, to have that, positional flexibility. We've seen with Jair Brown, he's kind of built like a guy that you would like to use across the defense, and they have used him across the defense and in those prowler packages as a linebacker. So, safeties, they bring that defensive flexibility. I think Penn State wanted that, and that was a real key for them in this class to nail down that position.
All right, John and McGonigal, I just have one more question here for you on the blue-white breakdown. I don't know that there are a lot of people that had punter on their bingo card for the first maybe transfer portal edition for this current cycle, but it sounds like that's exactly what's happened. I see that there is a punter, I believe, is it from Florida, that is now a Penn State Nittany Lion? Is that accurate?
Yes. So, Riley Thompson, I believe is his name. He's Australian. He was a freshman All-American from FAU, but because he's older, he only has 1 year of eligibility.
Right.
So that's an interesting little wrinkle. But he's a guy. Look, Barney Amore is moving on. The real punt god is moving on, and so Penn State needs to fill that spot. Alex Pacheco is a guy that there's a lot of confidence in his, just raw talent and his potential. But to bring in more of a seasoned punter can't hurt.
Sure.
And it's one of those where you just want to make sure that that's not an issue in 2023. If you're hitting on all cylinders on offense, if your defense is doing its job, you just don't want special teams to lose you a game or two. And so that's kind of how I see it. And if you're able to add a veteran presence and some more experience to that room, you might as well.
All right, that's a wrap for this edition of the Blue White Breakdown. Johnny and I have to get back to it. There are some coaches to talk to later in the day. Check back on PennLive for some recruiting updates. Probably there'll be the Penn State's obviously not done. Some things could change in the next couple of days, but Johnny, I know you and I are eventually going to be getting ready to go to California next week, but in the meantime, try and have some fun this weekend once signing day is over. There might be a game on Christmas Eve that both you and I are looking forward to in NFL circles, although some of the bloom is off my Dallas Cowboys rose, but I still will be rooting hard for that game. As I just want you to enjoy it, have a good holiday, and I guess we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. No, full disclosure too, throughout this entire podcast, there's been this like pop-up of software update for my laptop that's just hanging out on the screen. And I've been nervous this entire time that it would just auto update. I've tried to cancel it a million times and it's just not happening. But that aside, great catching up with you here, talking about this 2023 recruiting class. And looking forward to the impending trip to the Rose Bowl, Christmas, the holidays, Birds, Cowboys, even if it is Gardner Minshew that's going to have to take out the boys. Hope all of our listeners have a really good holiday, great weekend. And we'll touch back next week when we're just about ready to head out to Pasadena.